The scene begins before language left written traces. Before cities. Before farming. Before history itself. Nobody knows who the first person was to truly understand death. Not because the evidence vanished. Because thoughts do not fossilize. Bones survive. Stone tools survive. Campfires survive. But a realization leaves no footprint. Somewhere, hundreds of thousands of years ago, an ancient human looked at a body that would never move again. Something changed. Not in the body. In the mind watching it. That moment, if it happened, may have been one of the most important events in human history. Every civilization ever discovered has tried to answer the same question. What happens after we die? Why did every culture ask it? Where did the question begin? The strange part is that death itself is not uniquely human. Animals die every day. Many animals even react to death. Elephants have been observed touching the bones of other elephants. Chimpanzees sometimes remain beside dead infants for days. Crows gather around fallen members of their flock in behavior researchers sometimes call crow funerals. Even dolphins have been seen supporting dead calves near the surface. These behaviors suggest that many animals recognize something has changed. But recognizing death is not the same as understanding it. Humans appear to do something very different. We imagine the future. Then we realize one day we will not be inside it. That realization creates fear. It creates grief. It creates memory. It creates religion. It creates art. Perhaps it even created civilization. How can archaeologists study a thought that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago? They cannot examine the thought itself. Instead, they search for its fingerprints. Those fingerprints appear in places where ancient people treated the dead differently from ordinary objects. A body abandoned after death tells one story. A body carefully buried tells another. The oldest possible burials remain controversial. Sites dating to roughly 300,000 years ago contain intriguing clues, but scientists continue debating whether nature or human intention placed the bodies where they were found. The evidence becomes stronger much later. Inside caves across Eurasia and the Middle East, archaeologists uncovered skeletons positioned with unusual care. Some were laid on their backs. Others rested in shallow pits. Several appeared intentionally protected from scavengers. One of the most famous discoveries came from Shanidar Cave in present-day Iraq. There, researchers uncovered the remains of several Neanderthals. One individual had survived devastating injuries long before death. His arm had been badly damaged. He suffered blindness in one eye. His body showed signs of severe disability. Yet he lived for years. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone kept him alive. That discovery transformed the way scientists viewed Neanderthals. Perhaps they were not merely surviving. Perhaps they were caring. And if they cared for the living, what did they feel for the dead? The debate only grew more fascinating. In the 1960s, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky suggested one Shanidar burial contained flower pollen. The discovery inspired headlines around the world. People imagined grieving Neanderthals placing flowers beside loved ones. Later research challenged that conclusion. Rodents may have carried the pollen into the cave. The flowers may never have been there at all. Yet something even more interesting remained. The burial itself. Even without flowers, someone appeared to have placed the body deliberately. That raises a haunting question. Were they simply hiding a corpse? Or were they saying goodbye? No fossil can answer that. But every new discovery brings us closer. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeologists continue uncovering burials that suggest ancient humans thought about death in ways no other species has yet demonstrated. The evidence does not tell us exactly what they believed. It tells us something perhaps even more remarkable. They believed the dead deserved attention. That simple act may have marked the beginning of one of humanity's oldest questions. And we are still trying to answer it. For a long time, many scientists believed that only Homo sapiens buried their dead. That idea no longer holds. Evidence from Europe and Western Asia suggests that Neanderthals also placed bodies in deliberate positions. Whether those burials carried spiritual meaning remains uncertain. But intention matters. An intentional burial means someone stopped. Someone dug. Someone lifted another body. Someone chose a place. That choice alone separates the moment from ordinary survival. Around 100,000 years ago, another mystery appears. People began placing objects beside the dead. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But often enough to raise difficult questions. Some graves contain stone tools. Others contain animal bones. A few contain ornaments made from shells or teeth. Why bury useful objects? If survival was everything, those tools should have stayed with the living. Instead, they disappeared beneath the ground. One explanation is practical. Perhaps belongings simply remained with the body. Another explanation reaches much deeper. Perhaps people believed the dead still needed them. Archaeologists cannot interview the people who made those decisions. They can only compare patterns. And the patterns slowly become impossible to ignore. By roughly 40,000 years ago, burials became increasingly elaborate. Bodies were covered with red ochre. Children received beads. Adults were buried with ivory spears, carved ornaments, and carefully crafted clothing. One extraordinary burial at Sungir, in present-day Russia, stunned researchers. 2 children were buried head to head. Thousands of tiny ivory beads surrounded their bodies. Each bead had been carved by hand. Creating them likely required thousands of hours. That investment makes little economic sense. Unless the burial meant something beyond survival. What kind of society spends months honoring those who can no longer contribute? Perhaps one that understands memory. Perhaps one that understands love. Or perhaps one beginning to understand mortality itself. Death changes more than emotions. It changes time. The moment humans recognized they would die, the future became something entirely new. Plans suddenly had limits. Parents knew they would leave children behind. Children knew their parents would someday disappear. Every goodbye carried a different weight. Could this realization have changed the human brain itself? Some psychologists believe awareness of mortality encouraged long-term planning. Others argue it strengthened families and communities. If life is temporary, cooperation becomes more valuable. Knowledge becomes something worth passing on. Stories become a way to outlive the body. That may explain why nearly every culture developed traditions surrounding death. Burials. Songs. Ceremonies. Monuments. Names. Photographs. Memorials. Each one pushes back against forgetting. Even today, modern funerals serve many purposes. They honor the dead. But they also help the living continue. Perhaps that has always been their greatest purpose. Death ends one life. Meaning allows everyone else to keep moving. Then another mystery appears. Why are humans almost alone in imagining death long before it arrives? You know you will die. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Someday. Your brain carries that knowledge every moment of your life. Yet somehow you still make plans decades into the future. You plant trees whose shade you may never enjoy. You write books for readers you will never meet. You build homes for future generations. You leave behind photographs hoping someone will remember your face. That is an extraordinary contradiction. The awareness of death could have paralyzed humanity. Instead, it seems to have inspired humanity. The fear of disappearing may have created our greatest achievements. And that possibility changes everything. Because the first person who understood death may also have been the first person who truly understood life, the evidence becomes even stranger when humans begin creating places for the dead instead of simply burying them. Long before written history, people returned to the same burial grounds again and again. Generation after generation. The dead were no longer disappearing into the landscape. They were becoming part of it. This happened in different places and at different times, but the pattern is remarkably consistent. Memory was becoming physical. A grave could become a landmark. A landmark could become a sacred place. A sacred place could become the center of a community. Some archaeologists believe this changed human society in profound ways. When people began caring for the dead in permanent places, they also strengthened the bonds among the living. Families became connected not only by blood, but by shared memories. Communities gained a past. A shared past created a shared identity. An identity made larger groups possible. Could entire civilizations trace part of their origin to grief? No one knows. But the question is worth asking. The archaeological record also reveals something else. Children were buried. The elderly were buried. People with disabilities were buried. Even individuals who could no longer hunt or gather were sometimes cared for until the end of their lives. That tells us something important. Human value was beginning to extend beyond immediate usefulness. A person mattered because they were part of the group. Not simply because they could contribute. That idea still shapes our world. Hospitals. Nursing homes. Funeral rites. National memorials. Everyone reflects the belief that a human life has value beyond survival alone. Yet there is one question science still cannot answer. When did humans first realize that they themselves would die? Recognizing another person's death is one thing. Recognizing your own future death is something entirely different. There is no fossil for self-awareness. No bone that records the birth of existential thought. No stone tool that proves an individual imagined their own final day. That moment, if it happened gradually, may never be found. Instead, scientists piece together clues from behavior. Planning far into the future. Creating symbolic art. Passing down stories. Burying the dead with care. Each behavior hints at a mind capable of imagining things that do not yet exist, including its own absence. Modern neuroscience offers another clue. The same brain networks that allow us to remember the distant past also help us imagine the distant future. Psychologists sometimes call this mental time travel. It allows you to revisit childhood. It also allows you to picture tomorrow. Or 20 years from now. The cost of that remarkable ability is impossible to avoid. If you can imagine tomorrow, you can imagine a tomorrow without yourself. Perhaps that is why every culture has searched for meaning beyond death. Some imagined an afterlife. Others believed in reincarnation.